This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pal Evan Grant. David Moore is at the owners' meetings trying to decipher Jerry Jones, and so we will talk a little bit about that in a minute. But first, Evan's back from a road trip. The Rangers made to Cincinnati. A really crazy three-game series. If you just read the numbers from that series, Evan, and did not know the outcomes of the game, you would have said, "Oh, they got plowed in those three games."
Yeah,
and they came out of it, 2-1. Their second series win of the year. They're 2-0 in series. What a crazy couple of games, three games that was.
yeah. It just the first night, Kamal Rocker just wasn't very good. His misses were all over the center of the plate, and it just made it easy for the Reds to go to town, and they did. They had 6 runs on them in the first 2 innings, and it was, it put the Rangers in a really bad spot because they had really no bullpen that night. They had 2 guys, and it was a prescription for disaster the rest of the turn of the series if they were going to have to go deeper than that just to finish the game. So you get through Monday night when they lose 14-3, and you think this has the possibility of going really bad. But I think the answer to all this is that, it started out really badly, Kevin. I mean, Kamal Rocker really probably shouldn't have gotten out of the second inning, and he did. He gave the Rangers 3 innings. But his misses were all over the heart of the plate, and the Reds are an aggressive team, and they hit fastballs, and that was just a bad matchup. And it put the Rangers in a really delicate position because they only had 2 relievers available, really, on Monday night. Their bullpen was kind of gassed from a heavy workload over the weekend. And so you look at all this, and you're sitting there Monday night thinking this series could go really bad, really fast for the Rangers. But I think the answer to all this is, when Nathan Eovaldi is involved in the mix, he understands the assignment. I'm having a hard time right now coming up with a free agent other than Adrian Beltre who has been a better signing for the Rangers in their history in terms of on-field performance. And Nate went out there and did everything the Rangers needed to do. He counterbalanced the Cincinnati offense with a really varied pitch mix that didn't rely on the fastball at all, really. Was very efficient with his pitch mix. Didn't have an inning of more than 15 pitches. And you look up in the 9th inning, he's still in the game. He's got 90 pitches. The Rangers have scored on a Wyatt Langford home run, and that was it. And they're winning 1-0. And darn if Nate doesn't finish the game out in 99 pitches, the first 1-0 Maddox in Rangers history, where a starter goes the full game and under 100 pitches, the first 1-0 game since pitching numbers were kept, since pitch counts were kept in the late 80s. I did go back. Charlie Huff won a 1-0 game in 1988. I think he pitched 11 innings in that game, and he threw 163 pitches. 163.
He would just get warmed up too. Well, explain to people what a Maddox is, Evan.
I already did. So you just weren't listening.
You just said a Maddox. You didn't say which Maddox it was.
I said a Maddox, which is a game of under 100 pitches, complete game.
Who was it named after?
Is named for Greg Maddox, who had 4 of them in his career, but had 4 1-0 Maddoxes, but had a lot more complete game under 100 pitch performances. And here's a cool stat. The last 2 1-0 Maddoxes in baseball have happened over the last 3 years. The pitching coach both times, Mike Maddox.
Greg Maddox's older brother.
That's correct. Yeah. I'm assuming at this point in time that our audience is familiar with the Maddoxes.
Oh, then let's not even use first names anymore. Let's just say, use whatever we want in there. Then why be specific about anything? Let's just assume that's what.
All right, Sherrington.
That's what we do here in journalism. We just assume the reader knows things.
So anyway, it was. I'm having a hard time coming up with a more impressive regular season start in Rangers history. Folks, I got a new puppy over the weekend, and I'm having a babysitter right now because my wife is not feeling all that well. So she's a little bit squirmy.
So we're all
Birdy.
babysitting the dog. That's the deal. We're all babysitting the dog now.
Her name is Birdy, and I'm going to send some pictures of her on the internet later on. But she can bark occasionally, so I'm trying to babysit her just a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah, that's not me objecting to what Evan says. That's his dog. So get that straight.
Anyway, I'm having a hard time coming up with a regular season pitching performance by a Rangers starter that was more impressive than that, given all the circumstances. I know it's early in the season, but the ability for the Rangers to get in a real issue with their bullpen was significant. And Nate turned everything around for the Rangers and not only got them a win, I think saved the bullpen for the ability to pitch on Wednesday, which we'll get into in a second. And I think he paved the way for Jack Leiter. I really think having Nathan Eovaldi pitch in front of Jack Leiter is going to be beneficial for Jack. And what we saw on Wednesday was Jack Leiter go out there, retired the side in order the first 3 times through, just like Nathan had done the day before, just using the same kind of pitch mix and not relying on his fastball nearly as much as he usually does, getting quick outs. And in the 5th inning, he's allowed 1 hit on 70 pitches. And it was looking like he was going to go, into the 6th and have the first quality start of his big league career. Of course, the problem with throwing a bunch of breaking balls is that you put a lot of stress on your fingers because you're really ripping on the seams and you're causing a lot of friction. And he already had a little bit of a tender area of skin on his middle finger on his right hand. He ended up with a blister there. So that led to his departure. I looked at the blister yesterday after the game, and I mean, not that I'm a medical doctor, although I do take care of puppies. But I think that it didn't look terribly red. It just looked like the skin had been pulled off. And I think the Rangers are hopeful that with an extra day of rest, thanks to today's off day as we record this, he should be okay to go the next time they need him in Chicago. So for them to come out of there having won that series after that first game and to get those 2 pitching performances while the offense continues to struggle was just really, for me, an astounding feat. And I do need to go back and mention this. The 2 1-0 wins on back-to-back games, first time in Rangers history.
Well, Evan, thanks for that monologue. We'll move over now to the Cowboys segment of the podcast.
You asked me to recap the series.
Man, take a breath in there somewhere. I was trying to ask you a couple of questions a couple of times, but you were just rolling so much, I didn't want to jump in there.
Well, go ahead and ask. It's never stopped you from talking over me before, Kevin.
Well, I have to. Between you and David, it's just like a constant. I feel like I'm jumping into the middle of the rapids all the time.
Well, with David not here, I felt like I had to feel the time.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. Well, see, a couple of things here. First of all, I thought what you wrote about Leiter's performance in obviously the last game of that series and about the reaction to pitching after Nate Eovaldi was really telling because I thought that was for him to be the influence that he is on other pitchers anyway. I mean, whether he's pitching in front of him, behind him, whatever, just the fact that he's on the staff. One of the things about Eovaldi, and of course what you also said about him being the impact he's making as a free agent signing, I got to tell you, after what he did for the Rangers in that title run in 23 and how well he pitched then, and then, when the contract was up and it's like, they came back and they signed him, right? But it was almost like, in my mind, I'm thinking, why in the world wouldn't anybody want Nate Eovaldi? I mean, why isn't this like an automatic? Why don't people jump all over this? yes, there has been a little bit of an issue with his health and how much he's available.
Well, there was a big issue with his health early in his career, for sure.
Well, early in his career, but I'm saying like in the last couple of years,
right?
Because what Bruce Bochy said about him was that I don't know that I've ever seen a better. I guess the way he couched it was pitcher with the game in a pressure situation.
That was just the puppy knocking a plate off the table.
Yeah,
everything's fine.
Okay, good. That's good. Thanks for that. Is that yes? That's the way I feel about him. I feel like that in the time that Bruce Bochy's been here, and maybe it's just because we're both old guys, is that so many of my opinions dovetail with his. If I like something, if I like something about this player or what they do, he likes what that. And I'm thinking that he likes it first, and I'm just trailing along after that.
Oh, so you're saying you could have been a Hall of Fame manager?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. No question about it. If I just maybe played baseball professionally, I could have done that. This is like that George Costanza thing, when Jerry's asking him, what do you think you could do? He goes, well, I'd like to be maybe a baseball announcer. He goes, well, it kind of helps if you actually played baseball. But anyway, no. My point is that it's not hard to figure out. Sometimes in baseball, people will tell you stuff. People who really know a lot about the game, and you'll just go, okay, I'm just going to have to take your word for this because I'm not seeing it, right? But with Bruce Bochy, when you have done something in especially in a big time situation like Nathan Eovaldi has done, and you do what he did the other day, it's like, yeah, this is special stuff what he does and what he's able to do on the field. You read from everybody else talking about Nate that, well, he's got the stuff of a number 3, but he's got the makeup of an ace. And that's the thing about him is that he makes all this work, whether he's got his fastball or not. And then what Jack Leiter said about him was that, as you wrote, he said that Nate told him, throw your soft stuff. Don't worry about the fastball against these guys. This is a fastball hitting team. And, that was obviously what happened to Kumar Rocker, right? He couldn't land his curveball, that big fat curveball he throws. And so then he was having to throw his fastball. Well, it doesn't matter how hard you're throwing that. They're killing it. And so it was,
especially when Ellie De La Cruz is swinging the torpedo bat.
The torpedo bat. Wow. That thing took the game by storm in the first week, didn't it?
It's funny. We certainly heard about the torpedo bat on Monday night, but then when Ellie De La Cruz went 1 for 8 over the next 2 games, we didn't hear that much about it.
No, there were a bunch of duds. There were no torpedoes the rest of the week. Yeah. So, well, and you and I talked about that too, as Tito Francona pointed out. These torpedo bats, yeah, they might make a little difference. It's more about who's wielding them than anything else. It's just like steroids. Steroids did not make you into a good hitter. It made a good hitter a better hitter. The fact that you were on steroids because you were just stronger and make a quicker bat and all that. But if you couldn't barrel up a ball, you're not going to be able to be a great hitter just because you're taking steroids. It's the same thing with a torpedo bat. I do believe it's possible that if you're putting the fat part of the bat, in a better place where they can hit it, then yeah, it's going to be effective. But if you're not a good hitter, it's not going to.
Well, I just want to say this about the torpedo bat and try and say it as quickly as I possibly can, is what the Yankees are swinging versus what the rest of the league is swinging right now are different things. The Yankees have spent a lot of time measuring their players, basically creating like a golf club fitting for their players.
Yeah.
They've taken all the data on where the players hit the ball and where their misses are. And by misses, I'm not talking about swinging misses. I'm talking about just poorly hit balls. And for each player, almost individualized, they've moved the barrel or the heart of the barrel a little bit, maybe a 1/4 of an inch in some guys, maybe a 1/2 an inch in some guys. They've adjusted that, and not all the bats are the same. So though the Yankees have created a competitive advantage with those, the rest of the league may get some benefit from the torpedo bat, but I don't think that it's going to match up with what the Yankees have done, because this has been, it's not just a question of ordering bats. The Yankees have put science behind this, and I do think it's something that it's going to take the rest of the league to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. The fact that I didn't think of the Yankees as advanced analytics, right? We think of Tampa Bay for that. That's the organization that has all the really advanced, metrics. That's interesting that the Yankees have done that, but it makes perfect sense. I think it's a great analogy. Is
The
to
Yankees are very savvy on analytics. They don't crow about it a ton, but they're very savvy. I mean, they were one of the first teams to have, and I'm going to write about the traject pitching machine that the Rangers have added this year, which is a whole different story, but it's basically a hologram of a pitcher throwing, a pitch in BP so that you can face Garrett Crochet before you're actually facing Garrett Crochet. And I do think that it's improved the Rangers' approach at home because the traject machine can't travel. It's a big, big deal. I think they're over $1 million a machine. But the Yankees were the first to put it into play. They've invested in technology and science at the top of the game.
That's interesting. Well, but I think it's also a great analogy that you gave about like fitting a golf club. Why there shouldn't be anything left in the sport where it's just like, yeah, this just feels good to me. This is what I'm going to use. Or all the thousands of stories we've heard about guys and bats, right? Guys bat breaks, he doesn't have any more bats. He uses somebody else's bat, picks it up, and then hits a home run. That kind of stuff. Those are very romantic stories, but it should never come down to that kind of thing. Everybody should have what is exactly the best kind of bat for them at any given time. And so that's interesting. I'll look forward to reading your story about the holograms. And does Luke come with it? Is there a Princess Leia image as well?
I shouldn't have said hologram. It's more a projector. But I've seen video of the machine, and it's really cool in that you get Garrett Crochet's motion and the ball comes out where his hand is. The only real technological issue with this is, extension and where the pitcher releases the ball has become a real measuring point and a big factor in pitcher's effectiveness. And for the traject machine to be able to do that, I think you're going to have to create more of a sliding gantry that allows the machine to move out a little bit when the pitch is delivered. The dog just tried to jump on my desk. But
oh my gosh.
Anyway, I do think it's going to be a really good tool for the Rangers. And they have joined, I think it's about half the league now that has them.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's good to know that I was about to give them credit for jumping out to the forefront of this, and now they're just in the middle.
No, I actually believe that this was a part of Chris Young's negotiation on his contract for this time around, and I'm hoping to get into all of that when I can get this story finished. But I think that Chris felt that this was necessary for this team to improve its offensive approach, both in the immediate term and in the long term.
Okay, very cool. Well, so the Rangers, as we're taping this on Thursday, are off today, and then they'll be back at it out at the ballpark this weekend. So I guess the one concern in all of this is that Kumar Rocker gets his curveball working again. He got it working at the end of spring training. Had a nice start. It wasn't a pretty good start. Then a nice start, and then he pitched well in relief as well. But that wasn't good last week. So I think the feeling was going into the season that one of those two guys was probably going to drop out of the rotation when Patrick Corbin was ready, and he can be brought up on the 11th of April. I would say right now that Jack Leiter is an early running to stay in the rotation, and I'm not saying that that Rocker would come out either, but if he doesn't pick it up, it's going to be a pretty easy case for that.
I think that he might have as few as one more start before the Rangers have to make a decision. I think Corbin can be recalled as early as April 11th. And, maybe the Rangers want to see a third start from Corbin based on what he does in his first two. And maybe they want to see a third start from Rocker. That's all still to be determined. It just wasn't a good start for Kumar, and he said as much. To his credit, he said he's got to be better. I think the Rangers were frustrated with the fact that that the misses were over the heart of the plate. That's just if you're gonna miss, in baseball, you want to miss away. And that just didn't happen, and Kamar couldn't make an adjustment fast enough. And really, I think one of the questions we had about Kamar coming in was going to be, what's his secondary stuff like? And so we saw that you can't just get by with a fastball. You've got to have something to go with it, and he did not have that the other night.
Among the many ways I'm embarrassed, one of them was I went into the after his last spring start and surprise, and I went down and I asked him about what his third pitch was. He said third pitch, and I said, well, basically all I could tell you was throwing was the fastball and that curve / slider, and he said he had was throwing like 5 pitches, and I got to tell you, it didn't look like 5 pitches to me. So what is the book on that?
Yeah, I mean that is the real question, and I mean this is a question that I had asked him after a incredible, rehab start at Frisco last fall or last summer. But it is pretty much the fastball and the slider curve. I think sometimes maybe he calls it a slider, other times he calls it a curve. I think the Rangers basically consider it one pitch. The funny thing is, when I saw Kamar in college, he didn't have a fastball that night. Really didn't have a fastball to speak of. And I thought he pitched a great game against Ole Miss without much to work with. So I think he's got the ability to pitch. I just do think that it's important that he's going to have to get more confident in using an actual third pitch. Right now, it does not seem like he has that, and that's going to make it really tough to get through a lineup 3 times. Last night Tuesday he struggled, or Monday he struggled to get through a lineup twice, but it's going to make it really difficult to get through a lineup 3 times if you don't have anything else to offer him. And so that's what he's got to work on. And these are things, Kevin, right? We've talked about with Bruce Bochy about Kamar Rocker's times to home plate, which have been slow. He was able to speed it up to about league average for his last spring training start. But there are some things that you see that you say, okay, this guy had, 5 starts before the Tommy John surgery, and he had about 8 starts last summer. He hasn't had much minor league experience to speak of, and there may be some finishing off that needs to be done. I don't have any doubts that Kamar can be a really good pitcher. I just do wonder, if there is some finishing off that needs to be done in an environment where he can have more success rather than failure.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Before we get out of our Ranger segment, I would like to just address the whole issue of, the Rangers were built to slug, right? And that's what they were going to do. And so far they have not slugged. They're just slugs. They're not slugging. We had a good start from Wyatt Langford. Had a decent start from Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim, and that's a good thing. It upticks there, but slow from Simeon, slow from Seager, and they're going to have to get something from those guys at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty much slow all the way across the board. I will say this: I do think that we have seen some glimpses from Langford. You've seen some improvement from Garcia and some improvement from Heim. And look, on the offensive side, if you have to figure, if you get improvement over last year from Heim and Garcia, this offense long term is going to be in pretty good shape. So I think that the takeaway for me after 7 games is the offense hadn't been great. I do think that at home their approach was really good. It just didn't get great results. But I think that this is, I think it takes some time. They didn't come out of the gate slugging, but I do think that their approach is better, and I do think you're going to see more results over the course of the year.
Okay. All right, if you say so. Yeah, I'm not really worried about them hitting. They'll hit, I think, eventually. There's too many good hitters in this lineup, I think, for it to be something that lingers that long. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now and talk about the Cowboys. Of course, that's David is at the owners' meetings in Florida, and of course, once again, Jerry Jones says a lot of crazy stuff and draws a lot of attention to himself. Sometimes I think he just does it. He knows he's saying something stupid just so people will pay attention. Uh, I don't have any other explanation for it. Why else would he say, in referencing contract extension negotiations with Micah Parsons, and when he's talking about Micah's agent, David Mulligetta, who's one of the big power brokers in NFL free agency. It's not he's not somebody that people don't know. Twice he made a point of saying he didn't even know his name.
Kevin, can I just ask you a question? Can you just explain the whole Micah Parsons thing to me? I'll hang up and
Well,
listen.
yeah, the thing about all of this is that, of course, as we know, Micah's still under his rookie contract, and so the Cowboys don't have to re-sign him right now, but they know they have to really get this thing done, because the last thing you want to do is go into a contract season with Micah. He's one of the best players in the NFL, and so there's been a lot of talk about this. Why hasn't it gotten done? They really need to get it done. They can't wait. Of course, Jerry waited on Dak Prescott. He waited on CeeDee Lamb. He waits on everybody. And as he explained it the other day, the reason he waits, he said, I'd rather pay more and get it right than to get it wrong, than to screw it up, is what he said. And how that makes any sense, well, it takes somebody like David Moore to explain it to you. Because David spends a lot more time around Jerry than I do. But what the way that David explained it was, Jerry went on to say that there have been times when I have given contracts to people, and then they play really well, and then they want to tear up their contract and renegotiate. That happened with Emmitt Smith, it happened with Deion Sanders, it happened with Zach Martin, it happened with Jason Witten, and to some extent, it happened with Tony Romo. Look, I get that. That's frustrating when a player comes back and doesn't want to, play under the deal he has. But that's just part of the game, when you're playing with the big boys, that's what you got to put up with and figure that out. It doesn't mean that you just go on and on and on and holding on and waiting to find out, what you're going to get with a player. If he had signed, Micah to a contract extension earlier, and not let Myles Garrett set the market, then maybe we could have got him a little cheaper, and maybe it helps him get one of these free agents. Because when you've got a team where three guys are going to have $135 million starting next year, if they do re-sign Micah, and that's between Dak, CD, and him, and then you figure on another $40 million coming from Oso Odigizua and Trayvon Diggs. Well, that's $175 million committed to five guys. So that means that you're going to have to get a lot of players on the cheap. You're going to have a lot of young guys. You're going to have some older guys who are probably on 1-year deals. And that makes it difficult.
Kevin, I think I'm getting what you're saying now.
Yeah. What's that?
Can I draw a parallel?
Draw a parallel. Go right ahead.
So the Rangers got it right with Nathan Eovaldi, right?
Yeah.
But if they'd offered him $20 million a year for 3 years, say in July of last year,
yeah,
they'd have gotten him signed and had $5 million to go somewhere else. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying earlier about Nate. Was like, why, to me, he's worth the money. I mean, I get the whole thing about his injury. And when you've got Jacob deGrom, and who's making money for doing nothing, or he has been anyway, then I get, the issues with that. Of course, the difference is there is no salary cap in baseball, as we know, so you don't have to.
But I mean, in baseball, the CBT functions as a de facto salary cap that owners use as a salary cap, and that was the Rangers' reason for not going out and signing an established closer. Now, I mean, I don't want to go back into the Rangers, but I'm just drawing a parallel here. This is the deal: the Rangers did get the right guy with Nathan Eovaldi, right? But they are still, there is some question about how deep is their bullpen and how deep is their actual starting rotation depth. I will say this: if they had been able to have $5 million left going into spring training, they would have been able to re-sign Andrew Heaney.
Yeah, right. And I know that Chris Young likes Andrew Heaney. So back to the Cowboys. So the issue for me is, and I proposed this, and I'm not, I'm not saying they should do it. I'm just saying they should think about it. And you should always think about these things. But if you're going to struggle this much to sign Micah Parsons, and apparently David believes that this is going to get done, it's just going to happen. I'm not sure it's a good idea. And I'm not sure it's a good idea because of this, not because of who Micah Parsons is. Now, look, one of the reasons they're kind of, hemming and hawing on this whole deal is that they would like Micah to be more of a classic leader. They would like him to be a guy who shows up out there at the start when he's supposed to be there, the involuntary workouts with everybody else, and not do all this stuff where he's training with sumo wrestlers or whatever else crazy thing it is that he's doing. They probably would like it if he wasn't doing the podcast, because they don't think that's a good idea to be talking about the things that he does. I think that probably we're just
right. The Cowboys just want to control. Now, I bet you the Cowboys would love it if he did the podcast, if the Cowboys own the podcast and they were making money off of the podcast.
Well, you bet they would. So there's no question about that. Listen, it's just a different world now. It's not the same world that it used to be that we live in. You just have to get used to those kind of things. Correct. When a guy plays as well as Micah Parsons plays. Look, let me just say this. I want to make this clear to everybody. Micah Parsons is the Cowboys' best player. He might be their best player this century. I think that includes a guy like Zach Martin, who's one of the best guards. Zach Martin's probably the second best offensive lineman in Cowboys history, behind only Larry Allen. I think that Micah Parsons is one of the greatest Cowboys ever, just in pure talent.
So can I just say this before you move into analyzing what the Cowboys should do next?
Yeah.
I mean, I've listened to all this. I read your quick take that was in the print yesterday. And the whole time I'm reading this, I keep coming away with this. The Cowboys get into trouble every time Jerry Jones thinks he is smarter. He needs to stop acting and speaking like he's smarter than the rest of the NFL.
Well, that's what he does.
You can't eliminate agents in this game. And it's only going to cause more acrimony with the player. And I just, it's insulting to me as a sports fan that Jerry would like foist this upon people. This is just not how sports works anymore. You're not smarter than the game.
No, he's not. And he's certainly not smarter than Howie Roseman with the Eagles, who constantly is rebuilding, reshuffling.
How much does Howie pay you?
A lot. He pays me a lot of money.
I have never heard you love an executive like you love Howie Roseman.
I love active GMs. I like GMs who are doing stuff, they're percolating or making things happen. I had a conversation with Chris Young this spring, and we talked about Dave Dombrowski. And I told him how much I love Dave Dombrowski because he gets stuff done. He's not afraid. He's very bold, and the track record is there, right? Taking 4 teams to the playoffs. I mean, he winning World Series. I mean, he's organizations. He's terrific. And Howie Roseman's in that class.
Dave's long-term vision, ever since he left Montreal, Dave's long-term vision has really been about October. His horizon ends at October every year.
Yes, it does. And if it doesn't work out, he just moves on. And that's what Chris said to me. He goes, "I'm not interested in moving on. This is where I grew up."
No, but I mean, I know what you're saying, but yeah.
But yeah, that's his vision. But that's the thing. If Jerry can't make these things work, if you're getting boxed in by your superstars, it's kind of like that whole NBA model, right? Where everybody wanted to have the 3 superstars. And then the problem with that was if you got 3 superstars in the NBA, then how do you construct the rest of the roster? It's kind of a little bit of a mess. And then one of those superstars gets hurt, well, you're really screwed then because the guys that you have behind them are not very good. And so that model kind of came and went, really, right? Now you're seeing where people are kind of back to more of the 2 superstar model where we have better role players behind them. And I think I'm just beginning to wonder if the Cowboys wouldn't be better off if you can make the right move, like Bill Barnwell did for ESPN, in which he proposed in a trade where it would be a 3-team trade between the Browns, the Cowboys, and the Falcons. And in that 3-team deal, which is all very complicated. But the Cowboys would end up with the second pick, which is the Browns pick, and then they would end up with the 15th pick, which is the Falcons pick, and then they give up their 12th. So they'd have 2 first-round picks, then they'd also pick up a 3rd-round pick. Now, is that enough for Micah Parsons' talent? He's a Hall of Famer. Probably he keeps this track. Look, with the second pick, the whole point would be that you try to get Abdul Carter of Penn State, who is everybody's Micah Parsons starter kit. He had 12 sacks this year after they moved him over. They did basically the same thing with Abdul Carter that they did with Micah Parsons. Only he is, I think, because of what Micah Parsons has done, now people are recognizing the talent that's there. That's why the Cowboys got Micah with the 12th pick back in the day, because everybody thought he was good. They had no idea he was going to be this good. If anybody had any idea that Micah Parsons was going to be this good, he'd been the first pick of that draft. So
is he the best player from that draft? Is he?
Yeah, from production standpoint, yeah, for sure. So, and then that guy, Patrick Surtain, was the cornerback the Cowboys wanted to take, and he went at 8, I think, to Denver, and that's why they traded down and took Micah Parsons. And Surtain, he's tremendous. He was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year as well. I mean, he's a tremendous player, but he's not a game wrecker like Micah Parsons is. It's close, but he's not a game wrecker like that. So, Abdul Carter, could he come in and give you a reasonable facsimile of Micah Parsons? And I'm not saying he'd be as good. If he was 90% as good, 80% as good, would that be good enough for you? If you were now paying him, a rookie salary for 4 years, and so you're moving back, and now you're being able to add more players, maybe even to sign more free agents. And if you're able to do more things, maybe you're just better off in that kind of situation. I don't know. That's a hard thing to say, especially on the heels in this market of a franchise that just traded away a franchise player. So that would be a difficult thing to make a call on, but it's certainly something the Cowboys should discuss. And I don't know I don't say one more thing. I don't think it really is, because Jerry is enamored with stars. And so that's why Jerry is saying all this stuff about I'm talking directly to Micah. I'm not talking to his agent, because Jerry loves his stars. And so I do think he'll resign him. I just don't know if that's in the best interest of the Cowboys, if he's going to keep giving these guys max money.
Well, again, I had 2 thoughts. One is I pretty much stopped listening to your explanation once you mentioned Browns and Falcons, because it just basically, look, that's 100 years right there without a Super Bowl win.
Well, those are the kind of people you take advantage of. That's why they haven't won. You go to those because they don't know what they're doing, and you rip them off. That's the whole point.
Well, I'm not so confident that Jerry's going to rip anybody off, but I do think that sometimes you are what your trading partners are, and that is inept. And the second thing is, I just keep going back to that quote that Jerry had about the Micah Parsons deal, and how he's not talking to the agent, and how he's the guy, explaining in such a condescending manner, I write the check and he signs the check. I can't see how anybody in the market, fan, player, Micah, his agent, wouldn't read that quote and just be boiling mad, because it's just it's condescending and insulting in so many ways.
Well, it is. You would think it would help. And what's the point of doing that, right? And you're in the middle of negotiations. Why would you try to insult the agent? I mean, and clearly, in my mind, he is trying to drive a wedge between Micah and his agent when he does that kind of thing. Because, he as he said, he negotiated directly with Zach Martin. He negotiated directly with some other players over the course of his career. And remember, back in the day, we used to always say about Jerry, the problem was that he was too close to his players, right? Because the players were jumping over the position coaches and the head coach and going directly to Jerry to make complaints about things. They could get in there and they could help run things. I don't think that happens anymore. It doesn't happen like it used to, but it probably, not certainly on scale. It is happening individually now with a guy like Micah Parsons.
But Jerry's missing the point. Yeah, maybe Zach Martin he could negotiate directly with, but Parsons has said he wants his agent there.
Yeah.
Respect the player's negotiation stance, because anything else, look, I mean, I don't want to get into socioeconomics or political or anything, but I think more and more you just see this. If I'm a millionaire and I'm negotiating with a billionaire, I'm 100% convinced that that billionaire is going to try and take advantage of me. And that is the message that Jerry is sending everybody, that I'm going to outsmart everybody and get Micah Parsons for cheaper than he should get.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that, but then he just said, I'd rather pay more and not screw it up. So who says that? I mean, that's what's so crazy about all this stuff with Jerry. It's just a bunch of blather. And it makes for, it fills airtime and it fills up print and the rest of it. The problem in the end is that, as I said, is that he will end up paying this guy because he likes him. That was the problem back in the day. Look, in the 90s, let me give you a specific example. He signs a fullback who's a very nice guy and is a very nice player, but he signed him to a nice big contract when he shouldn't have, and that's the problem, is that back in the day, he was given the players that he really liked big deals, big contracts. And I don't think he does that as much anymore. They are better about managing their cap than they used to be. Of course, back in the early part of his career, there wasn't a cap. So he could do those kind of things, and it got him into trouble. He wanted his players to love him, I think. Certainly the good players to love him. And I think that was part of his ego. He liked that part of it. He's different now from what he is. Of course, that was 35 years ago. So obviously he's going to be different. But it's still a mess. And there's no question about that. They are a mess, and they are approaching a zone where you're going to have some really high priced players who are really good, and the rest of the team is not so good. And that's a mess. You don't want to be there. You either want to be at a point where everybody is that all dovetails together, the talent all melds well, or you want to be in a position where you can just bottom out and start all over again. But that's hard to do when you're going to have those kind of contracts. They got a lot of work to do.
Let's move on from Jerry talk.
How's
insulting.
How's the dog handling all that? How's Birdy handling the
Birdy is lying in my tennis ball chair right now. She's hanging in.
She's hanging in there. All right, we're going to move over then. Stop talking about the Cowboys. That's making you sick. I'm with you.
I don't know why this one makes me so much madder than the other things, but it's just like a total disregard of the hierarchy of how this works now.
Well, there's no question about that. It borders on some things that we could question about, how Jerry's doing in his dotage. But we'll see. Sometimes he has a reason for doing what he does. I'm not going to justify it, though. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Final Fours coming up this weekend. It's right on it's right in front of us here, as a matter of fact. This was a kind of the classic chalk type Final Four, all the number one seeds. So it was.
And we're reading. It was funny. I'm reading more and more that, like, with NIL, right, you're not going to have the Cinderella stories as much anymore, because that takes a year or two to kind of build those teams. And the minute that those teams have a good player, he's transferring somewhere else. That is a long time power.
Yeah, I think that's probably a logical explanation, although I don't think it explains Butler. I don't remember all the players that were on those Butler teams, but I think there's still room for that team that is just 6 or 7 or 8 guys who have played together for 4 years, and so they know each other inside out. And a little bit like in the Olympics, when you see these countries and they don't have any great players on them, but they've been playing together for 10 or 15 years, and so they know each other so well, and they use that cohesiveness to get on a nice run. I think that's still possible, but there's no question that the players that in those mid majors who were good players that people just didn't know about coming out of high school, they have moved on
Yep.
to bigger programs now. So on one side of the bracket, you've got Duke playing Houston, and on the other side, we've got Auburn and Florida. These are four teams that are kind of similar. They're all really defensive oriented programs that they run on that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I have, of course, a vested interest in the Houston Duke angle. Not only did I grow up in
Because
Houston,
you graduated from Duke.
yes, I would. I don't think I could have graduated from Duke if I had started back then. And you gave me all these years to do it. I went to the University of Houston, graduated from there, and then I covered U of H for the old Houston Post from 1982, the spring of '82, after they lost their first Final Four to Michael Jordan in North Carolina. I was assigned to the beat right after that. And then I covered them through into the fall of 1985. So I covered the last two Final Four runs by Houston back then. I wrote a column about not really comparing those teams to these teams, because there's no comparison. Kelvin Sampson is a much different kind of coach than Guy Lewis was. Kelvin really stresses defense. Guy Lewis, they ran these zone traps, and they were very good and very effective, but obviously they were famous for dunking the ball, right? I mean, that's why they were called Phi Slama Jama. So Kelvin Sampson's teams remind me more of Milton Richardson's Arkansas teams in the early 90s at 40 Minutes of Hell. They just get in people's faces, and they just don't stop. They do. One of the things that they do on defense that's so remarkable to me is that when the ball handler goes behind a screen, when he comes out of the screen, he's now got two guys on him, and the whole point of the ball screen is to get you open, right? And now you've got two guys on you. It's remarkable how they execute it. It's a pleasure to watch. So Kelvin Sampson has four core tenets, and three of them are about defense. So that tells you the emphasis on it. They are the number one defense in the nation. Of course, Duke has a very good defense as well. They're the 7th ranked defense in the nation, and they've got Cooper Flagg, who is going to be, the top pick in the draft. So that is going to be a really good game, I think. I think if Houston remains true to its identity, I think that they will win that game. The problem for Houston, in my mind, is that when you expend that much energy on defense, it has to come with a cost, and that cost is your offense. It's hard to be a two-way player when one side of the ball you're playing that hard. L.J. Cryer is their leading scorer. He played, amazingly enough, he was a freshman on Baylor's national championship game, the team that eliminated the Cougars in the semifinals, the Final Four semifinals that year. So I wonder how many times has a player won a national championship on two different schools? I mean, I guess that's probably happened before, but if the Houston were able to do that, that would be really remarkable if they did. So we'll see. I'm very intrigued by that game. I am going to go ahead and home it up and say that I think Houston will win. They will beat Duke, and then I think Auburn will beat Florida, and I think that Houston will beat Auburn for the title. So, Evan, who do you have in the Final Four?
Kevin, how long have you known me?
About 20 minutes.
How many times have I ever picked against an SEC team?
Well, I mean, you're going to have two of them in this.
I know. And so here, let's do this. We'll make a bet. Okay. Let's make a bet.
All right.
I'll take the winner of that side of the bracket, and you can have the winner of the Duke Houston game, and we'll bet lunch.
Lunch?
Lunch.
What? Where are we going to have lunch?
S&D, our favorite place.
Wow. Okay. Now you're talking. Okay.
Okay. So really, I don't care. I mean, I know the women in my home would like for me to be picking Florida, and I really like what I saw from Walter Clayton Jr. My heritage makes me pull for Bruce Pearl a little bit. It's always nice to have a good, nice young Jewish man coaching in the Final Four. But I think the SEC was the best league in basketball this year. As we know, it's a basketball conference now.
Yeah.
And so I will give my wife the nod this one time, and I will go with the Gators. Chomp chomp. And let's just say that Florida beats whoever comes out of the other side of those two fine academic institutions.
I think you're taking a shot at Cougar High when you say that.
I was taking a shot at Duke.
Oh boy, I tell you, it would be nice to see Houston win this game. They have been to 7. This will be their 7th Final Four. There are only 9 schools that have been to more Final Fours than Houston. All 9 of them in front have won at least one title. Houston has not ever won. So, as I said in my column, they're kind of the Susan Lucci of college basketball.
Susan Lucci Kids was a soap opera star in the 80s.
In the 90s.
When soap operas were important. But
I think
anyway,
people still like soap operas.
Susan Lucci Kids was nominated for a daytime Emmy like 18 times.
She won on her 19th time. It was very, very funny. It became a punchline. She was on Saturday Night Live once, and in the opening monologue, while she was talking about the fact that she hadn't won, all of the cast members who had won Emmys were holding them up and and celebrating the fact that they had won Emmys that she didn't have.
I just need to amend that to it became a punchline. It also passed as a punchline.
Yeah, it does. So, it would be nice to see them win that. It would have been nice if the '83 team had won. Houston, of course, they lost to North Carolina State at the pit in one of the most famous endings in college basketball history. That was, of all the teams that have made it, and those first two, were the ones with Elvin Hayes and Don Chaney in the mid '60s, and of course, Elvin Hayes and Don Chaney were both great players, both Hall of Famers. And then Houston had then the 82, 83, and 84 teams also had a couple of Hall of Famers on them, and Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. But I think that 83 team was the best of all of them. It was extremely talented, and they ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw against North Carolina State. They weren't expecting that.
North Carolina State was still riding a high from beating Georgia in the semis.
That was Georgia. That is the worst semifinal team ever in the Final Four. That Georgia team. That Durham guy. What was his name?
Hugh Durham.
Hugh Durham. Yeah. What a joke. What a joke that team was. Meanwhile, Houston's playing, Louisville in this huge dunk fest in the other semifinals. And of course, that was part of the explanation for what went wrong for Houston, was that they expended so much energy in that comeback, dunking in the semifinals at elevation. That had been a storyline before the Final Four. It's like, how's that going to affect people? And everybody just tried to poo-poo that whole thing. And it clearly was a factor in the game. I remember at one point in the finals, Lorenzo Charles, who, of course, had the winning shot, the winning dunk, picked that air ball out of the air.
From Derek Whittenburg.
He was bent over at the baseline after some kind of play down there, bent over, holding onto his shorts, just gasping for breath while the ball's going back the other way, And then Lorenzo Charles ends up making the play of the game and practically the century. That was I felt I didn't as a UH alum. Look, I went to school. It was a commuter school then. It's a commuter school now. But I didn't have any affection for it from an alum standpoint. I just liked those guys. They were nice guys. That guy Lewis I don't think he ever got his just due. I would have liked to have seen that team win the title. Had they won the title, people would call that one of the 5 best college basketball teams ever. it really, whether they won or not, it's one of the 5 best college basketball teams ever. But no one gives them. If you don't win at all, you don't get your due. So I'm sorry that they didn't break that. I think it would be nice if the Cougars broke that streak now. Kelvin Sampson is a really good coach. He's done a really good job. He's a little sensitive about his name. Occasionally gets called Kevin. I don't know why he's got a problem with being called Kevin. It's great.
I
name.
do.
Yeah. So I think, if he gets that, maybe people will get his name right and he can be happy about it. He's got the last name of Sampson. How can you be complaining when you got a name like Sampson? Holy cow.
I hear you.
Yeah. So anyway, and then now let's see. So this is our potpourri segment. We need to talk a little bit about the Mavericks.
Let's wrap this up. You've wandered all over the place with Houston memories.
Wow, that's a shot. These are pretty good memories. Okay, they made a 30 for 30 about it. Did they make a 30 for 30?
And you star in that.
I did star in that. I was fantastic.
But let's just tell them that we'll talk next week about a basketball reunion.
Yeah, the Mavericks going to have a basketball reunion next week. If you weren't aware, the Lakers are coming in next week, and the Mavericks are going to play a guy named Luka Doncic, who after a little bit of a break-in period has been pretty good for the Lakers. Shock of all shocks.
Shocker.
Yeah, shocker. Meanwhile, Anthony Davis has come back for the Mavericks, and he's really putting on some gritty wins for our local club, our Hoops Club. So that'll be fun. I'll be out there for that game. I'm interested to see the reaction for that. That will be really something to see what everybody does. So I guess that's going to do it for us. Evan's ready to go. His dog is out the door, I think. And
there's been a mad escape here, and I need to attend to whatever's happened.
Dogs on the loose. All right. So from everybody in here and everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.